Oh, so what are we doing? We are expanding the reach of citizen science by strengthening the community. We work a lot on enhancing digital skills for fair and open science communities. We are continuing the development of our EU citizen science platform. We drew this through co-design, so everyone can have their voices heard and what they think is needed for the platform. We continue the development of the ECS Academy, which already contains a lot of free trainings to increase the capacity to do citizen science. We focus a lot on boosting inclusion and diversity for mainstreaming citizen science and including voices that are lacking in citizen science. We advocate for citizen science and work on policy impact, and we are investigating the impact of citizen science on research, society, and economy. And we're working with many different target audiences. With citizen science practitioners, we have the EXO working groups, our citizen science ambassadors, the platform users, researchers at different career stages, citizens, developers, policymakers, research and innovation organizations, public libraries, industry and SMEs, and of course, all of you here. And together with everyone, we are, strengthening our infrastructure also. And we do this in many ways. The code of our platform is open and we provide support to those who want to build their own platform. We help develop different APIs to connect to other platforms. Of course, the structure of the academy as well to make it user-friendly, that everyone can take advantage of the capacity that is being offered there, and also the connection to other infrastructures like EOSC. Again, in capacity building, so already in the academy, there's a lot of different trainings and this is constantly updated. More trainings will come, more formats. We are also creating capacity on fair data and open and fair tools. So there are courses on how to visualize your data for beginners. We do a lot of hackathons and datatons and training sessions for developers, and do a lot of participatory capacity building sessions also to, boost the work on inclusivity and empowerment. A lot of what we do is to co-creation and co-design. So like I mentioned, the platform, we run these yearly co-design sessions so everyone can participate in developing the future of our platform. Also the same with the academy, we have different networks having an important role in defining how it will look. A network of trainers and educators, also a network of researchers. And of course, we are now developing a competency framework for citizen science to better identify what are the knowledge that is needed to conduct citizen science and where do we need to build capacity. If you haven't heard of this yet, please let me know in the chat and I will put information on how you can join this new adventure. And of course, we work on policy recommendations for citizen science and open science, also through co-design sessions. And our work on inclusion and community building focuses on expanding and strengthening the community. So we have our ambassadors working in the local communities. We are working with public libraries. We have our pilots on inclusion, and we work with ongoing citizen science projects, pilots with SMEs. We have our collaboration group where we link to other citizen science initiatives and projects. And of course, we do our best to involve all the interest and important stakeholders. I will finish leaving you with one of our most recent outputs. If you scan the QR code, you would get to the Zenodo link where we collected, it's a booklet of different impact stories of the work we did in different communities across Europe. And there they tell you a little bit about the work they did and what kind of impact they reached with the community they were working with. And if you want to know more, we are always available. You have already our handles on the chat, but I leave them here for another second. And that is me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for this quick introduction. So I'll share my screen again, just a second. Just in case there are a few people here who are not familiar with citizen science yet, I've included just one slide with a rather basic definition. So in our understanding, citizen science is the active participation of members of the public in research activities, such as data collection, and data analysis, the development of research questions, etc., etc. As you have probably read in the description of this event, sort of the starting point are the Sustainable Development Goals. In this event, we want to talk about citizen science for sustainability, both within this SDG framework and beyond it. So we don't know yet what comes after the SDGs, but we can take a look at the SDGs themselves. So this is just a very, very basic and brief introduction, because I'm sure we will hear a lot of interesting things about this from our panelists. So very briefly, we're talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are intended as a blueprint for achieving a sustainable future. They were adopted by the UN in 2015 as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And they comprise 17 goals, 169 targets, and 231 indicators. The number of indicators changes every now and again, so I hope this is still up to date. Here, you've probably seen this infographic before, just an overview of the goals, 17 in total, ranging from societal issues, education, to economic concerns, poverty, decent work, all the way to environmental issues, biodiversity, pollution, etc. The latest report on SDG progress showed, as you can see here on the left, a concerning picture. We're really quite far from reaching those goals. On the other hand, progress has been made when it comes to data availability for SDG monitoring. And data generated through citizen science has also been fed into this monitoring. However, there are still massive data gaps throughout the framework, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that later on. Especially when it comes to these data gaps, but also beyond the question of data, there's a huge potential for citizen science contributions to the SDGs. Numerous studies have shown that. So 4 years ago now, in 2020, a declaration was co-designed and published, the CS SDG Declaration, Our World, Our Goals. It was drafted in 2020 as part of Germany's EU Council presidency and co-designed together with members of the citizen science community and other stakeholders from across Europe. It was signed in total by nearly 300 individuals and institutions. The declaration, the sort of the main part of the declaration, was a set of 11 recommendations grouped into 3 blocks: harnessing the benefits of citizen science for the SDGs, strengthening citizen science and its connections with other communities, and strengthening future citizen science systems. Now, 4 years, now actually it's already nearly 5 years later, we would like to update this declaration and draft a new version, a new updated version that will once again be co-designed with the community and other interested parties. So if you would like to contribute to such an updated declaration on citizen science for the SDGs, another set of recommendations for the community and policymakers, then please feel free to sign up for our mailing list, and we'll invite you to co-design activities, both in the form of workshops and asynchronously. You can scan this QR code that's on your screens now, or click the link with which a colleague of mine is going to post in the chat. As a first step on this journey towards an updated CS SDG declaration, which will we're aiming, I forgot that, we're aiming to finalize and publish this updated version in September this year. So the co-design process will probably stretch across April to June. Uh, as a first step, we've conducted an anonymous online survey with members of the citizen science community. It was widely distributed across the EXA mailing list, etc. To basically take stock of the progress that has been made so far with regard to these 11 recommendations. We have a sample size of 80 with basically three questions. One on the progress assessment of these 11 recommendations contained in the original declaration, and 2 open text questions. I'll just give you a very, very brief overview of the results. This is just an initial analysis, and I don't want to take away too much time from the discussion. So just to give you a brief impression, the first question was a Likert scale question. In your opinion, to what extent have the 11 recommendations been implemented so far? All these recommendations relate to strengthening citizen science with a view to contributions to the SDGs. As you can see here, there's a lot of red and yellow, which means that there is still considerable room for improvement. Overall, people were not, the respondents were not that optimistic or that confident about progress made so far. You can see here that for quite a few of the recommendations, near between 80 and 90% of the assessments were negative or neutral. There were outliers, so just to give you a brief glimpse at sort of the positive, more positive aspects. One is about collaboration between citizen science and related research communities, and policy support for networking. There we have a slightly more positive picture. The same holds true, and even even more positive assessment was made for citizen science community communication about data quality issues, and mainstreaming across Horizon Europe. That was also sort of a positive aspect in this whole assessment. We also have a few negative outliers. The first one is about funding and strategic support. The second one concerns the integration of citizen science for the SDGs in curricula of schools and higher education institutions. And the third one relates to specific funding that is sort of tailored to the requirements of citizen science projects, for example, in the sense of small-scale funding or upscaling funding. So that's just a very brief glimpse at this progress assessment. We also asked for enabling factors and potential new recommendations. So enabling factors for making progress or advancing the implementation of these 11 recommendations, and potential new recommendations that could be included in our updated version. As you can see here, there's a very clear winner. With funding being mentioned, the font size represents the number of occurrences in the data set. So funding was the most prominent aspect overall. There also was a feeling in these responses that there's still a lack of awareness of the added value of citizen science and the potential of citizen science for SDG or sustainability goals more generally. And then we have a few sort of capacity building and training, also quite prominent, institutional embedding, and then a few sort of smaller issues related to infrastructure, data, inclusion, and recognition for practitioners. So that's a brief glance at these results. A more detailed analysis will be part of a report that we will be writing over the summer, and it will also, and the results will also be shared, of course, during this co-design process. So if you're interested, please sign up so we can keep you updated. And that's where I stop, where my part finishes, and I hand over to Alan Irwin, our moderator, to start the panel discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Marius, and thank you to Carolina. Yes, a lot has been said in terms of setting the scene, both with regard to citizen science in the ECS project, but also, I guess, our central focus this morning on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So my name is Alan Irwin. I'm sitting right now at Aarhus University in Denmark. I'm also based at Copenhagen Business School, and I get to ask questions to what I think is an extremely interesting, very well qualified panel. I'm going to ask you to briefly introduce yourselves in just a couple of moments, but please use the chat. I can see already lots of points are being made in the chat, so please use the chat to ask questions just whenever they come up. Before the break is at 11:05. We will mainly be hearing from the panel, but after the break, we have plenty of time. We have 45 minutes to open up the discussion. So we will be watching the chat. There are so many things that we could discuss amongst us, and there are so many questions that I could ask, but I think it's more interesting for you to contribute. So don't hold back. Make comments in the chat, and we'll do our best, particularly from 11:10 onwards, to bring in your questions. So now we turn to the panel. We have 5 members of the panel, and I'm just going to ask each member of the panel to say, just one sentence to introduce yourself. I'm coming back at you, don't worry, with questions, but just to set the scene a little bit. And I'm going to do this in alphabetical order by surname, so you know who's coming next, which I think means that you, Mikhail, are the first to go. So just perhaps a quick word about yourself and your take on your position on this in terms of institutional location.
Thank you, Alan, and thanks to everyone also for inviting me to this. I am Michael Arntoft. I'm heading the European Commission's unit on open science and research infrastructures. And for us, and in fact for the whole of Europe and or the world, the definition of open science includes public engagement in research and innovation at all levels and all stages of the process.
Thank you, Mikhail. We're coming back to you very soon. And the next member of the panel is Dilek. Perhaps you could give us there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Dilek Kreisel. I'm a senior research scholar at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA, that is based in Austria. I'm also the managing director of the Citizen Science Global Partnership that's also based in Austria. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilek. So you see, we've got some very impressive people. And next, who also fits that category is Francois.
Yes, thanks, Alan. I'm Francois Gray. I'm a professor at the University of Geneva. I manage something called the SDG Solution Space in the heart of international Geneva, next to all the UN organizations. And I also have a lab called Citizen Cyber Lab, which has been around for 15 years now.
Thank you, Francois. Very good to see you again. Ariana.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone. My name is Ariane König. I'm a professor at the University of Luxembourg, and my main interest is societal transformation processes in complex social ecological systems. So where the social and the ecological sphere are tightly coupled and inseparable. So it's transdisciplinary and embedded research. Yeah, so citizen science plays a key role in this, as we need new forms of science to fuel societal transformation processes for sustainability.
Thank you very much, Ariane. And last but by no means least is Walter.
Yes, good morning. My name is Walter Rademacher. I was the chief statistician of the European Union for a couple of years and head of Eurostat. And now I'm an honorary professor at the Munich University. And my field of interest is the sociology and ethics of quantification. So this is more or less.
Oh. The sound just died at the end there, Walter, but
Yeah, I think it's my earphones.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think we got it, and it's a beautiful picture of München behind you. So thank you very much. And let's get the panel started. And I know I'm going to ask you to give relatively short answers, but they're big questions. So I understand. Don't feel you have to have the final the word on everything. But just to go straight in to the issue that's at the core and to put it very, very generally, we've already heard about the fact that we're getting close to 2030. We're 5 years away in terms of the strategic sustainable development goals. But there's a general feeling, and Marius put it forward, that our progress is, well, there are glimmers of hope. I was just looking at the UN Secretary General report, but there's also a general message of being severely off track. I think that's a quote from the UN Secretary General's statement, with a rather small percentage, as Marius also said, of SDG goals being on target. So just to jump right in, I mean, if you look at this from the perspective of citizen science, and I'm guessing most people are here because they're already committed to or can see the possibilities for citizen science. I mean, what's the challenge that you see, just to start very, very generally, in terms of making the link between citizen science and SDGs? I mean, put that positively, how could citizen science do better in terms of contributing to the SDGs? Are there things you think that citizen science could do? Or to put it perhaps more coolly, what are the challenges to making use of citizen science within the SDGs? So this is a very general question about how you see the relationship between citizen science and SDGs and what you think the challenges or the possibilities are. Why don't I just, for now, I won't do this every time, but just keep the same order, and then we'll swap it around a little bit. Also, I can see, Mikhail, that your sound is on and you're ready to go. I can see you're eager to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Well, I took off, put on the sound again because it's quiet here, so I don't have to click all the time. Yes, but on the other hand, yes, also eager to go. I think, I mean, citizen science, probably it's more important than ever to show also vis-a-vis the population how important science is to reach the SDGs. I'm not sure we're off track, as you said, but we're certainly in a need for acceleration. There is an increasing need for urgency and to move much, much faster with much more bolder solutions. And at the same time, have the grip also with the population. It's a very important actor in all of this. But of course, also for us, we come here from the European Commission side, both as a policymaker and as a funder. And it's true when you showed the survey results that funding, of course, is still very big. It's something which was also present 4 years ago. And by the way, I was around 4 years ago and was involved in the declaration in Berlin in 2020. So it's very interesting for me also to look at what are the positive outliers, what has been less developed or less implemented. it's true that, and I think this we will always continue to say, policy and funding can always be more developed, can always be more implemented. There's always a need for funding. I think in 2020, the different elements of where funding should go, we got it right. So first of all, into citizen science initiatives, the projects themselves, always need funding, maybe more than other types of research projects. Secondly, capacity building, again, continues to be important, both in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of skills and training. Institutional change is another one. If you want really to have an influence in terms of citizen science as a tool to reach the SDGs, and the whole, to come back to what I said in the beginning, linking up, networking, partnering, having a long-term engagement with the different relevant partners. I was happy to see the positive outliers as well, because there, exactly the partnering issue was there. And I would claim that we from the Commission side do have a stake in that, because we pushed very much this integration of citizen science into the thematic research communities. And this interaction is crucial. It's also crucial from the data side, which was another positive outlier, and in particular, the quality of the citizen science data, and the importance of integrating this type of data with other data sets that are officially recognized towards whatever is needed in terms of evidence in progress towards meeting the SDG targets. I think there's more to be done, and it was there on the slide, I think in the top right-hand corner, but very small. It's about recognition and rewarding citizen science, recognizing the important contributions of citizen science and its role in reaching the SDGs, which goes beyond data, definitely, but maybe we can come back to that. It goes also into links to the local national communities, the link to behavioral change, which has to go hand in hand with innovations, the innovations that are needed to accelerate the changes so that we meet the SDGs.
Thank you, Mikhail. And we're going to come into the issue of data quite a lot as the discussion goes on. But I just want to ask you a direct question, really, about the recognition of citizen science, because you've been in this field for quite a while and you've seen changes. Do you feel, for example, when discussions are taking place at European level about SDGs, do you think as citizen science is recognized, or do you find yourself explaining and perhaps justifying why citizen science is important? Do people see it the way that we do at a policy level?
We do see movement, certainly, including in the sectoral policy areas. Recognition, I can mention the field of environmental policy, definitely, but also in the research field as a whole. We have launched, actually around the same time, a big initiative on reforming the way you assess research. This is the Quara initiative, actually, which is fundamental, recognizing that researchers do, and also citizen scientists, they do a lot of activities that is increasing the quality of the research, that increasing the impact of what comes out of the research, and that goes much beyond writing publications in prestigious journals. We all know that. So it's a matter of recognizing all these additional activities that has an impact on what comes out of the research, and that definitely includes also citizen science.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mikhail. I'm going to move on to Dilek. And again, same question really about how you see the relationship or the challenges between citizen science and the strengthening of the SDGs.
Thank you, Ellen, for this important question. I don't know where to begin about the challenges, to be honest, and also the contributions. But I'll try and summarize based on what Marius showed us before about these enabling factors in citizen science. And I will just turn them around and talk them about as they are challenges as well. First, the advocacy bit, and then funding and capacity building. So we, as the citizen science community, probably are not really good at communicating what we can actually do, or we weren't able to. This has been changing in the last couple of years, and we've seen a lot of publications that is coming from our team at EASA and the CSGP, but also from the citizen science community in general. But we need to do more of this advocacy, not among ourselves within the scientific community and citizen science community, but also beyond, reaching out to policymakers, but not only those who are actually sharing the same mindset as us, but also others who are not actually familiar with this, who don't know what this is, including in those countries where access to such a level of data and information is actually limited, maybe to some certain level projects and experiences. But in terms of the link with citizen science and the SDGs, I will talk a little bit about data, although this was like really small, tiny bit in Marius's slide that really didn't come out so strong. But I think where we can start communicating and demonstrating our impact is really starting from data, because that's the way those communities will start hearing us and listening to us, because they have amazingly large data gaps in the SDGs. So we're talking about achieving the SDGs in the coming 5 years, but we have a lot of data gaps. So currently about half of the environmental SDG indicators are still lacking data. So we've done a study a couple of years ago and looking into the contributions of citizen science data into monitoring the SDGs. And we looked at the indicators, metadata, and at that time there were work plans as well. They are not existing anymore because all the indicators have supposedly metadata, or the methodology is accepted. And we found that 33% of the SDG indicators can actually benefit from citizen science data. And this benefit could be in many different ways. I'm happy to provide examples, but I think this will come out later in the conversation. Then we looked at the specific examples from a health and environmental perspective. And because of the study that was commissioned to us by the WHO. So they really wanted to understand the more detailed analysis, or they wanted us to do more detailed analysis to understand the contributions of citizen science to health and well-being related SDG indicators. And many of them cover environmental topics as well. And we found that the contributions could go up to 85%, and these are all published. And but we were also interested in, how we could actually realize this theoretical results that we found into reality, and how we can turn them into real world examples. And I'm sure Francois will have a lot to add there, but I will just briefly mention as well as a piece of work that we have done in Ghana, which we managed to integrate Ghana Statistical Service and the Environmental Protection Agency, government agencies in Ghana, together with UNEP, integrated already existing beach litter data into the official statistics of the country, as well as to the monitoring of the SDG indicator 14.1.1b, and reported to the UN SDG Global Database and added to their voluntary national reviews. So this actually sets, to my view, the first example of citizen science data being integrated into official statistics for the purpose of, being used for SDG monitoring. So I will talk a lot about other issues, but I think for me the key here is really fostering the dialogue, like demonstrating these examples and talking more about them, not only among us, like how great citizen science is, but also with other communities. So getting out of our comfort zone a little bit. I'll stop here, Ellen.
Thank you, Dilek. It's fascinating, very interesting. So from your point of view, it's basically spreading the word about the contribution that citizen science can make. It's a little bit like the question I was asking Mikhail, do people in the SDG area see citizen science and recognize it? And I'm interpreting what you say is saying, yes, there is substantial progress, but still we in the citizen science community, which is where I'm putting myself, could do better. How do you do that actually in practice? How do you spread the word?
I can actually give one example, and all of these publications that I actually mentioned about are part of that effort. So European Commission funded project we have led a couple of years ago, that's called We Observe. As part of that, we established a community of practice, and our aim was really to get out of this comfort zone and not talking only among each other about the contributions of citizen science to the SDGs, but also bring in diverse actors to the picture. And this was the success also, that actually that approach led to the success of that Ghana example that I mentioned. So really bringing together diverse actors and communicate with them what citizen science can do, and actually also what it's doing that could directly help, monitor and even implement the SDGs in many parts of the world. So I think really it sounds like an easy solution, but it's so difficult, extremely difficult to implement and bring those actors together and to make them talk to each other. So when we bring the civil society organization to talk about who'd collect the data, to talk about how they collect the data, they come to the table with different expectations, motivations, interests. Then the National Statistical Office representative come into the table. I have this data gap and I need to close this data gap. And then a lot of citizen science colleagues, do not like, we're not here to close your government data gap. So we're just doing something for action, do something. So it's just really, everybody has the main great goal of doing something, but they all have different aspects. And just to bring them together and to talk about those aspects and help them understand each other is not an easy task. And with this community of practice, we really try and achieve that. And I think we really made great progress on that, followed by these other initiatives I mentioned.
Thank you, Dilek. Thank you so much. And Francois, you're already, a link has already been made to your work in the Citizen Cyber Lab. Do you want to pick this one up in terms of SDGs and citizen science?
Sure, Alan. And I think it'd be good here from Geneva, with just across the street, the World Trade Organization, World Meteorological Organization, all these UN agencies and other international bodies, to stop a second and ask ourselves, we know what citizen science is, but do we really know what the SDGs are? And the reason I ask this question is because this week happens to be a pretty dramatic week for the United Nations. As you know, big changes. Our colleagues up the street, the World Health Organization, are facing, the major donor pulling out. So these are trying times for multilateralism. And so it's good to stop and think, why were the SDGs created in the first place, in order to figure out how citizen science can help them? And fortunately, I was very early on in this process. In 2015, I was tapped on the shoulder by a colleague from the UN Institute for Training and Research who said, "You're interested in citizen science. We're about to launch these SDGs. I think there's a connection." So that person was Nikhil Seth, the director of UNITAR until last year. And he happened to have been in the room where it happened when Ban Ki-moon was developing the SDGs in New York a few years earlier. And just to remind everyone in the audience, the SDGs were the continuation of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, which were a 15-year program from 2000 to 2015. It had 8 goals. None of them were met. So the solution was to add more goals. We get up to 17. But I'm being facetious because, in fact, there were some very important changes made. One was to take a work stream which was about human development in the UN and combine it with a work stream which was about ecological protection of the planet and merge them into the SDGs. That's why there are so many goals. Is some of them are about improving the lot of us humans on the planet, and some are about taking care of the planet. And as you know, these are actually incompatible, at least to first order. So, the big challenge of the SDGs is about trade-offs between them, how to make things work if you want people to improve their lot, but at the same time protect the environment. And I think citizen science really has a lot to offer here. And Dilek, who has published extensively about this, and I really encourage you to look at some of the articles that she's co-authored on the links between SDGs and citizen science. It's really gets into the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done. Dilek, you mentioned, I think, a key component, which is the UN is not there to tell the world what to do. The SDGs are not somehow instructions to nations about what they should do. It's an agreement between nations. It's a best effort. It's not an agreement that's signed off that people have to achieve the SDGs. So we have to look at it from that point of view. And the people who actually have to follow what's going on are in the national statistics offices, by and large. So UN agencies are custodians for SDGs individually, but the people gathering the data and who need information are in national statistics offices. And so we ran a project, so University of Geneva led a project called Crowd for SDG from 2020 to 2023. This was a European project with UNITAR, with CERN, and with other partners. And through that project, I learned that it's really key that we are in touch with national statistics offices for them to understand what citizen science can bring to their needs of tracking the SDGs, and for us to understand how citizen science, with a little tweaking, could contribute to helping at both the regional, national, and international level. And I think what Dilek said, which is very to the point, is citizen science is not about achieving the SDGs, usually. It's about solving my community's problem, my neighborhood's issue. But the data you generate could be super useful to the SDGs if you are formatting it in the right way, if you're gathering it with the right processes. And often the frustration is, because of lack of dialogue, that we're just missing out on the ability of citizen science to contribute to the SDGs because there's not enough exchange on, what are the basic requirements for data produced that's relevant to the SDGs. And then there's a whole other chapter, which I'm sure we'll get into, Alan, in the follow-up questions, which is beyond data, what can people do to actually achieve the SDGs, not just monitor them. But let's come back to that later.
Thanks a lot, Francois. And time is passing already, as we knew it would. So much to talk about. Ariane, what's your take on this relationship that we're exploring between citizen science and SDGs, particularly in terms of how that can be strengthened?
Thank you. So, Alan, I would like to pick up your quote that we are off track in the pursuit of the SDGs. So I consider citizen science, the potential thereof, as a Trojan horse. So if we need radical new ways of thinking and doing, to what extent can citizen science help us? So reduction of harm is no longer good enough. We need a shift to a regenerative culture. Picking up Francois on what Francois said, I think as long as the exponentially growing population's way of life is incompatible with planetary health, if there are only trade-offs, we won't manage. So I'd like to posit the challenge to all of us. How can we redesign and think of a citizen science that helps us in two paradigm shifts? So the first paradigm shift is a shift in understanding of what the human place is in the web of life. So how can we produce representations and data that show and highlight the interdependence of humans with other species? For example, soil microbiomes and human gut microbiomes. So to what extent can we use this highly collaborative space that Dilek described so well? Collaborations across silos are full of challenges. To what extent can we use this space to completely rethink of not the targets necessarily or the goals, but the indicators, what we measure, and how we define progress and how we visualize it. And so the first one, I talked a little bit about the first paradigm shift, and there are many ways I think citizen science can help in this. The second paradigm shift is governance, our ways of social coordination. And of course, citizen science is reconfiguring, as Dilek described, what science is and what science does and who does science and who contributes to the evidence base for policymaking. So I think we need a new logic of policymaking that focuses much more on empowerment of place-based regenerative action. Just reducing harms is no longer enough. We need regenerative action, like with new visionary EU laws, the nature restoration laws, and these sets of legislation clamor for new sets of indicators. But so how can we really also, Dilek described the starts of it very well, enhance how citizens contribute to this evidence base, but also at the same time fashion citizen science as a space for transformative learning about these paradigm shifts. And I think the role of schools have a huge role to play, but I'll stop it here. Otherwise, I'll be going on for ages. I just wanted to plant some seeds on the potential of citizen science as a Trojan horse. And you are welcome to pick up any of these, in the course of the seminar.
Thank you so much, Ariana. And I could see in the chat, there was quite a response to what you were saying. And again, can I just encourage people to use the chat? Certainly, I will be using the break, which is coming up in 10 minutes or so, to have a look at the chat. So now, and the panelists will too. So it will be very good in the next 10 minutes, particularly, but to put some comments down that will give us a starting point for after the break. But Walter, you're waiting so patiently to bring your, well, I think you're waiting patiently to bring your perspective to this. Again, same question about this interface between citizen science and the SDGs. And I'm guessing you're going to talk about the importance of data and statistics, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. So actually, I was more or less in the same processes 2014, 15, like Francois, but at the opposite side. So I was in the data, the statistics community. And I must confess that in the first place, after the disaster of the MDGs, I must say, I was quite hopeful because the changes made in the design of the SDGs were really important. And one of the changes was that the statisticians were invited to co-design with the diplomats in this area or in this period between 2014 and 15. Now, the result, however, is these 231 indicators after more or less 3, 4, 5 years of discussion within the statistical community. So you see, I am quite critical now, because I think if you use 1/3 of your time to agree on standards before you produce them, then this is not an adequate solution. What I would like to say is that from the very beginning, one should have brought in the factor time much more in order to come to other compromises than the compromises that the statistical community normally needs to make. So the revision of the current revision of the system of national accounts has taken 15 years. So this is the time span to agree at global level on new standards. And one should have said, come on, we need to have a first approximation with 20 indicators after half a year, and then come on and we will improve in an iteration. But this was the big mistake, apart from the fact that targets were set before the indicators were known. So it was just the wrong way to proceed. Now, what I would like to say is that on the side of the main data producers, which are the statistical offices, we have this relatively rigid construction. And the statistical offices around the globe, they are under big pressure now because of budget cuts. Let's see what will happen in the US, and debureaucratization, and the competition with other social media, which are producing so-called alternative facts. So it's understandable that they have not put, many of them, the SDG indicators at the top level of their production. They are somewhere in the cupboard, but not in the center. Now, what can we do? I think my example is, let's say, the paid fire workers and the volunteer fire workers. As we know, they cooperate quite nicely together. Let's assume that the NSOs, the statistical offices, are the paid fire workers, and the citizen science people are the volunteer fire workers. What are the enabling factors? And I have found none of them at the screen and the Wordle, because my main factors are firstly quality and quality assurance. Qualities means also accountability, trustworthiness, transparency. And the second is processes of information construction. So only if we look at really the process level, and with process I mean design, production, and communication of data or of statistics, then we will find also possible links at process level, which help us to bridge the gap between the, let's say, professional fire workers, this is statistical offices, and the volunteer ones. So my example is the UK. Here, the UK statistical regulator offers a quality stamp, a certificate, for those who want to be certified, so that it's assured that their quality is according and compliant with international statistical quality standards. So this could be a means to open also the, the mind and the willingness of statistical offices to include more of the, let's say, voluntary fire workers, help to overcome their data gaps. I stop here.
Thank you, Walter. And we're going to move into the break in just a few minutes, but I want to ask you, Walter, and then perhaps a panelist might join in. You know, what does it take to open up statistical agencies to the data gathered by citizen science? If you could say one thing that would be required from the statistical agency side to open it up, what would you say? Is that about spreading the word, as Dilek was talking about? Is that what the challenge is?
No, I would say statisticians in official statistics, they perceive themselves as being a factory with concrete processes which are very, very efficiently organized. So you need to go there and say, okay, in this particular process, it's not blah blah at a very general level. In this particular process, you might wish to include more of this kind of help. So the example is particularly in, let's say, the green indicators, the environmental indicators. One could say, look, if you want to construct official data on ecosystems and biodiversity, you might wish to also include the volunteers who are bird watchers, for example, or whale watchers or divers. And then if you allow them to load up their knowledge and their data on very clearly structured databases and clouds, where you can control the quality of the input, then they, I think, will open their mind. But their fear is that you have a kind of low quality input, which is then spoiling their brand, so to say.
Thank you, Walter. That was extremely clear. Francois, you've got 2 minutes.
I'll try to do it in one, because I think Walter summed up, the quality issue. I just want to put, I think there's an elephant in the room. It was in Marius's slide at the beginning, and that is funding. And I think one of the issues that can really help open things up here is to remind national statistics offices and their governments that this is a cheaper way to get the information you need. That's demonstrated. We have lots of evidence for that. Cheaper, but not free, right? Volunteer fireworkers still need fire engines. There still needs to be funding for citizen science. Let's not get confused here. But it is another way to get at high quality data, and it can reduce the cost of doing so. And I think that argument is a business argument that needs to be made more strongly.
Mm. Thank you very much. I promised a break, and I'm going to do that right now. And we're going to start again at 11:10. But please, while you're running out to get a coffee or whatever you're about to do, think about comments to put in the chat, because there's plenty more questions I can ask, but we'd really like to hear some of your points as well. But let's break till 11:10. Thank you for now. Thanks to the panel. Hi, everyone. I think we can come back again. I hope you enjoyed the break. And as you can see, we find that time goes by rather quickly. It's a very broad discussion. And I'm just looking in the chat, and panelists, you might also look in the chat if you haven't done so before. There's a question about Ghana in the project about beaches, but I think wasn't it Dilek who talked about the Ghana example? So perhaps if that's right, Dilek, perhaps you might post something in the chat. I'm sure we may not have time to talk about the example, but as Francois also said, if you have publications or anyone contributing key publications, it would be nice to mark that up. But I wanted to kick off with the slightly long comment, but interesting one about which comes in. I can see Fermin. I can't see all the name there, but you can probably see it, everyone. It says, if I may, I would like to raise an important point as highlighted by the panelists. Citizen science has proven its value in engaging local communities. However, its integration into regional and subnational SDG strategies remain weak. In my experience, I see a recurrent gap in how regional governments can systematically and fully citizen science into policy frameworks. I guess now we're opening up, we're not only talking about data, but the contribution of SDGs more generally. So I'd like to ask the panelists, well, it says for a stronger focus, I guess you could say how you can have a stronger focus on the Europe of regions. So how do you see, now we're talking about SDGs a little bit more broadly, how do you see that connect developing between citizen science activities and things which are happening possibly at not just the national, but also at the regional level? Do you have any thoughts about how policymakers in general could be encouraged at regional level, perhaps, to incorporate citizen science? And I think there's also a question for you in there, Mikhail, about how, from a European perspective, that might happen. So I think, Mikhail, I'm going to throw it over to you. And I'm going to ask Marius or Carolina, because the chat is moving and I may not be able to keep my eye on it. So please, I will ask Marius and Carolina, could you join in when you see something on the chat, because I might miss it. Mikhail.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I did say, talk about the importance of citizen science vis-a-vis the national level and the local level. We are conducting also exercises to monitor the progress of practicing open science, and that includes also citizen science. And we have seen during the last 4 years an uptake of national policies that include citizen science. There are now around 10 member states. I mean, 4 years ago, it was almost no one who had it. So over the last 4 years, a sharp increase in that. Some of them even making it mandatory. So trickling down also to the regional level and institutional level. And some also including citizen science policy as part of the broader national policies of open science. That's at the national level. But important for us also as a policy message is the inclusivity of our citizen science policy. Indeed, that they should, all kinds of frameworks should not ignore the voices of local communities that can indeed be barriers to achieving transformative citizen science. Of course, when we give funding at European level, we always need to have an EU added value, a European dimension to what we fund. So ECS, of course, is a key example of that, pulling together for the whole citizen science community in Europe, as was explained in the beginning, different services, different trainings offers, and so on. We also have another project, Impetus, that is about kickstarting citizen science initiatives or sustaining those already in place. And we have 2 projects that we recently launched, funding support for upscaling and maximizing the impact of citizen science. It's the CROPS project and the Science OS projects. Now, some of these projects include what we call cascading of our funding. And that is an important measure to reach exactly, as is in the question, the regional level, both in terms of the citizen science actors, but also the links to policymakers at that level. So if I may remind, it's something that was also taking the basis for today's webinar, was also in the 2020 declaration. If you look at it, I think it's at the end of the declaration, it talks also about the importance of the funding going to relatively small scale initiatives and going to the sustainability also at the regional, at the local levels. So even with EU level funding, we have put in place mechanisms that allow to take into account the nature of the kind of initiatives that we're supporting, and that indeed goes down to the regional and local levels.
Thank you, Mikhail. And now we're broadening out the discussion. In Marius or Carolina, I might ask you in a second about what's happening in the chat. But before we go to the direct chat, I want to ask the other panelists about, the contribution of citizen science to sustainability goals broadly now, beyond data gathering. Ariana, you talked very much about, well, Trojan horse was the expression that you used, Ariana. How in practice, I'll start with you, Ariana, if that's okay. How in practice do you think that that's possible to do? I think we can all take inspiration from citizen science projects and initiatives, but how would you make that happen? At least with data gathering, there's something tangible and concrete, and you can be addressing what policymakers see as needs. But when you broaden that out beyond data, isn't it difficult to achieve?
Thank you, Alan. And I would like to address this question looking both at co-design processes that Walter put to the forefront as being so important, and that also goes some way to addressing the questions on the region, on integrating the regions, or using citizen science as a tool for linking actors across different governance levels. I think that is a key requirement for transformation processes for sustainability. And in Luxembourg, we actually have the example of a project that was developed, a citizen science approach that was developed in a co-design process where we actually worked with river partnerships, so at the regional, at the river catchment level, so it was about water quality. But at the same time, we also engaged the national public authorities and the ministerial officials, as well as schools and school teachers. And the idea is that we design citizen science tools for multiple purposes. It's more than a one-trick pony. We engage different target audiences who service different but overlapping sets of indicators for slightly different purposes. But then we hope to have tools that can service and address both the quality needs, for example, from officials, the data needs and quality needs where officials feel gathering data on some indicator species, not only on big rivers, but also in small brooks and biodiversity hotspots, just exceeds our resources. So for those cases, we then we work with the administrators and statisticians to identify data needs that can't be met with existing public resources and quality criteria. But at the same time, we work with schools to see what would serve them well for the biology curriculum or geography curriculum to learn about human-environment relationships. And then we look at the common indicator sets where we have basically data that can be produced that services both needs in co-design processes.
Thank you, Marianne. Walter, would you worry that co-design leads to bad quality data? Is that something as a statistician, or do you think that's not such an issue in practice?
Well, it might be perceived as an issue from my colleagues, but I personally I am of the opinion that this is a must-do in the future. That the participation of civil society, so to say, in the first step of data production, statistics production, which is the design of the house, is certainly, I would say, mandatory for statistical officers, but we are not yet there. So it's still a field where the technical experts sit together, be they on the side of statistical production factories or be they on the side of use in ministries, in municipalities, and so. So it's a technosphere which is determining nowadays the design of statistics. This makes is a cause for skepticism and distance on the side of citizens. So I think the more we consult and include and co-design, the better we will have an understanding, let's say, a feeling of being partner and being co-producer from the very beginning.
Thank you. Dilek, I'm interested in your perspective on this, about the wider contribution that citizen science can make to SDGs or sustainable development broadly, beyond the data gathering side that we've talked about so far. How do you see, can it have a more transformative potential, or is that just too vague to really matter?
I think it's very important. Yes, it's vague and it's difficult to measure and show. That's the reason why we're having difficulties in communicating this aspect to the national statistical offices or, the data community to integrate citizen science data as well. But I don't think necessarily that additional contributions of citizen science to the SDGs are really disconnected from data. I think we're really talking about data for impact here. And we really need to keep that in mind before we say, there's these transformational aspects and other things. And they wouldn't come without, proper methodologies like Walter highlighted, right? These processes and this quality and all sorts of other things. Only then when we could demonstrate this impact, people will take citizen science more seriously, let's put it that way, and try and use it and see the impacts. But that's not enough only, but we also need to integrate it as the citizen science community. There's also a big task for us. So we cannot just basically talk about these impacts as an additional aim or, additional, like an add-on that comes with the data collection activity, but instead really aiming for it, like really integrating it into our objectives and into our methodologies, as well as, how we evaluate our initiative success. So that's really an important point. And what I would like to highlight, because I want to make the strong connection between data and impact of citizen science on all other aspects, is take the leave and no one behind principle of the SDG agenda, which is the main principle, right? That cannot be considered without taking into account the data aspect of citizen science. Because in order to be able to reach those who are mostly affected from the negative impacts of, let's say, environment or what's happening in the environment, we need to know where these people are and how we could access to those people, how we could bring aid to those people who are actually most in need. So we really need data. When we're talking about leaving no one behind principle, we need that data to be able to reach those who need this aid or who need this support the most. And that's also very important. In addition to this co-creation of solutions we basically mentioned, I also see the impact of it really vividly in the work that I've been doing in this area. And this co-creating solutions, this integrating this local knowledge to address specific sustainability challenges. But there's also a specific SDG indicator about this, that is SDG 17, that talks about partnership for the goals. So it's really co-creating solutions with diverse actors, diverse partners, be it in the data collection side or data gathering, monitoring side, be it on the implementation side of the SDGs. But also, I think there is no need to even mention that everybody is very well aware of and there are a lot of studies done on this raising public awareness and educating people on a lot of the challenges that we're facing. And citizen science is very well placed on that point. And I would like to come back to the question about the regional level. So how citizen science activities can be linked to the regional level. Just very briefly, I would like to mention one project that, again, funded by the European Commission, and we're doing in terms of the European scale, right? Because this is about Europe EXA work. There is a project that we're doing called CROPS, and CROPS is about upscaling citizen science Europe-wide. Because we know that a lot of citizen science projects that are very impactful, that are taking place at a very local level, but how we could basically make these impactful initiatives broader, like how we can bring this at a regional level, at Europe-wide, at even global. So the CROPS project is really trying to answer this question, but we also need infrastructures to be able to do this. And another European Commission funded project that was started this year, and I see my colleagues who will be working on that project with me among the audience, we really want to build the research infrastructure for Europe that also embed a lot of the citizen science data together to be able to make these data useful for monitoring the SDGs and global biodiversity framework, another colleague mentioned in the chat. I'll stop.
Thank you, Dila. There's a question just come in. I don't know if you can see it in the chat. It's from Smriti. And Smriti asks, are we simply talking about quantitative data? What about the more qualitative aspects? What about human stories?
That's really important. And when I talk about data, I bring all of them together. So there's real value in bringing qualitative data. And there's even working groups that are established at the UN Statistics Division. So there's raised awareness about the importance of qualitative data within the UN system as well to address a lot of the sustainability challenges and bring these data, how we can really make use of that for monitoring the SDGs and other global frameworks.
Thank you very much. Francois, I haven't forgotten you, but I've got a slightly tricky question for you, I guess. You referred to the WHO, and I don't want to get into immediate political situations, but you could say that well, we can't just assume that it's the sun is shining upon us in terms of sustainable development. There could be some dark clouds out there around the world. So and I'm wondering, what is then the role of citizen science? I mean, it's one thing to assume a benevolent global consensus about sustainability, for example. But what does it do for citizen science if perhaps there's pushback and countries who are saying, well, we're not necessarily fully signed up to something like the Paris Agreement. Where does that leave citizen science? Can it be a source of resilience? I guess is really what I'm asking you.
A great question, Alan. And I think you've probably come across this quote that the word for crisis in Chinese is two ideograms, of which one means opportunity. So there is always an opportunity in a crisis. And let's not be mealy-mouthed about this. We are in a crisis right now around these issues. We are not matching the SDGs. And as you say, many people are not even convinced that that's what we should be going for. But I would also say, to keep things bright, is that Europe is in a very strong position as far as bringing citizen science to the table to help solve this crisis. So I think citizen science can very much be part through proper policy decisions of filling gaps, greater gaps now, because there will be less funding for these big agencies. Maybe governments will invest less and so on. So we really have to make an effort here. And I'd like to build on something that Ariana said, mentioning schools. I would say my view is youth in general is the secret ingredient that will push citizen science forward. I see it in universities in particular that we need to be teaching citizen science in all courses, putting it in there. I mean, eat our own dog food. If we believe in it, we have to teach it. And I think the students are very receptive to the idea that they can do something. It's not just sitting there in a class. They can go out and gather data and do things. So we've put a lot of effort into this in projects, not just in Europe, but now in places in sub-Saharan Africa, where you would be surprised how much young people can achieve when you give them the means through citizen science methodologies to participate actively in helping their countries progress in their regions and so on. So I see a lot of hope here on the policy side. And I just wanted to mention that Dilek here is also managing director of the Citizen Science Global Partnership, which is taking many of the ideas. Frankly, EXA is a big part of this partnership, which includes CITSI Africa Association, Citizen Science Asia, and so on. And really, we are in a position to share the experiences here in Europe much more widely, and therefore have a much bigger impact than just Europe through what the EU is funding. So I really think that there are a lot of opportunities in this moment of crisis.
Thank you very much, Francois. It's really important to hang on to hope. Pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will, I think, is extremely important. But now I keep threatening this, but let me do it. Carolina or Marius, I can see lots of really helpful comments in the chat, particularly drawing attention to material, which is wonderful. Please do that. It's fantastic that we're sharing this as a community. But can you see anything, Carolina or Marius, that you think perhaps the panel ought to react to?
A question has just come in.
Marius, you've moved your microphone, I think. Yes.
You're right.
Yes.
Thank you. There's a comment that just popped into the chat about the economic dimension of citizen science in relation to the SDGs. So things like knowledge valorization, creating new jobs, developing technologies, that sort of thing, which is not so often talked about in this context.
Thank you, Mikhail. I'm calling on you now. Are you characterized in the EU Policy Forum as the sort of the one who's not into innovation and job creation because this is a non-economic kind of agenda, or do people see this connection between what we're talking about and the prosperity, let's put it like that, of Europe?
It's clear that the overall agenda for Europe is about competitiveness of the EU. In that aspect also, it's clear that research and innovation is at the heart competitiveness, including economic competitiveness. So we have a policy on knowledge valorization. Open science, of course, is an integral part of that. We also have partnerships, of course, with the private sector. So research and development partnerships in different forms. And of course, the one of the overall targets that we have for the research policy are on investments in R&D as a percentage of GDP. And whereas we are close to the balance, which is 1/3 public, 2/3 private, the overall investments are still far behind the 3% target. So we are very well aware of that, and also what we can do in terms of leveraging private investments by using public investments. So this link public-private is very important. And here I've been talking so far in general terms, but this applies, of course, also to citizen science. The link that we made also to the local communities, and of course the importance also of investments at all levels, including at member states. It's as you hinted at when you turned the question towards me, it's not the first let's say spillover effect of citizen science that we've been thinking of. I think the link to the regional developments is an important one. The link also to the local communities, the behavioral changes, the links to young people, I think is an important one as well, because it has this potential also to reach out in that direction. Reaching out to the in terms of the economy and the private sector, this is important also, of course, because you need also implementability of whatever solutions are there. And there, the partnerships with industry and the private sector is important.
Thank you. Ariane.
Thank you. Just briefly to complement that, we are developing, just starting to in a project, developing indicator sets for regional resilience, which I think is fundamental if one wants to have an economic organization that functions over the medium term and not only the short term. And so there are many indicator types that are really amenable to data collection with citizen science, including if we, for example, look at the food system and territorialization of the food system and improvement of the food system in terms of regenerative initiatives, one can monitor for organizational forms. So are there more cooperatives, or basically how are we organized, or how many participants are there in regional and community supported agricultural ventures? So this is just examples to say we need to reorganize our economies fundamentally for resilience, and citizen science has potentially a huge role to play in these types of indicators for this economic transformation. And but we're just starting on it. We don't have references yet.
Thank you, Ariane. Marius, I'm coming back to you again because I can see what's currently in the chat, but I'm wondering about losing good points that perhaps have been made earlier. Have you spotted anything?
I saw several comments on knowledge exchange, networking, also across continents. So yeah, fostering closer collaboration on a global level. That's been mentioned several times. There's also been a comment on the importance of tangible impacts for sort of volunteer motivation. Especially when it comes to young people. I guess the idea is that there's a risk of sort of burning people or frustrating people if you don't deliver on actual tangible outcomes. Those are the last few I saw. If you want to pick up one of those topics.
Maybe there's an issue also raised by Francesca that we maybe didn't delve very deeply, that we've been focusing on data and the kinds of data we can collect, but what is the impact that citizen science has in raising awareness? Is that something we should maybe pursue more? Is it enough?
Yeah, yeah, about the broader role in raising awareness. And I'm guessing, who do I go to? It's quite a lot of fun being able to choose. But Dilek, I'm going to pick you. On that wider role of citizen science, of raising awareness of environmental issues, I'm guessing you would be very positive about that. But have you a comment to make also about the particular position of young people, which came up previously? Is citizen science, is it connecting with old people, young people, or is it people of my age group who retire and then find they've got time to do this? So the wider role of citizen science in encouraging awareness, but the particular position of younger people in terms of collaborating in the projects that you know.
Yeah. I really love the comment that came from Ariane and Francois about that. And Francois, please come in to compliment me if I'm missing anything important, because we've been in a project exactly looking into this together. So it was building on a project that Francois has led before on Crowd for SDG, the whole methodology, and then about really helping young people and supervising them, or really coaching them. Coaching is the right term, I guess. About how to find challenges and actually how to address the specific challenges that are related to the SDGs in their own communities, and how to use citizen science data and methodologies to address these challenges. And as a continuation of that project, we work with UNICEF and a lot of different partners. We're brought under the leadership of UNICEF. We launched challenges, and one of the challenges and one of the projects that really came out very prominent from that effort was the Donate Water project in Nigeria. And it's really about youth and how youth develop different ideas and methodologies, and how they identify issues in their own communities, and how they really organize everything, like really on top of everything, to design their own projects, because they are the ones who know their regions and their local problems the best, and how they could basically design data collection methodologies, how they could check the quality of these data that are collected, and how they could communicate with those who actually collected these data, what they need to do to provide feedback on that, and then improve the process. And the project was a great success. So it was really about collecting data on broken water pumps throughout Nigeria. And we were really impressed about the interest that this project raised, not only, and this was entirely led by a young group of people who actually pushed this idea forward. And people collecting the data were a lot of young people. Of course, we know and we also really experimented with how we could actually fund those who could contribute their time and effort as part of this project, because as Francois highlighted at the start, this is an important point in citizen science, and we expect that to be volunteer effort. But in many parts of the world, people do not have time and resources to be able to collect citizen science data for scientific purposes and so on. So it was really about how we could utilize the technology, how we could utilize the knowledge base coming from these young group of people, and how we could address their potential community challenges. So I really think that there's great emphasis on young people, or there should be greater emphasis on young people addressing the SDGs in different ways. But I'll stop here, Francois. Is there anything you would like to add to that? If that's okay with you, Alan, sorry.
Oh, perfect. No, go ahead.
Right. If I can just, not much to add, because I think, Dilek, you really summed it up very nicely. But just to say, remind everyone that the situation culturally about who does citizen science may vary from region to region. Alan, as you said, in Europe, it may be that retired people have more time for it and young people are too busy studying or something like that. Although I think, there's opportunities for intergenerational collaboration are huge. In Africa, just to remind everyone, there are going to be 2 billion Africans by 2050, 4 billion by 2100. That's, to first approximation, most of the youth of the planet is going to be in a continent that's right next door to Europe. It's a huge opportunity. I mean, it's a big challenge again as well, but a huge opportunity for citizen science if we can think it through. What we learned, Dilek and I and others in this project that was mentioned, which is folded into a new EU project called Albatross, is that we can get young people to participate if we give them some kind of small financial reward. It really does help. If you're in the informal economy in an sub-Saharan country, it makes a huge difference if your time gathering data is rewarded or not. So I think we need to look at the economics of this and respect, regional differences that may arise, and also see it as an opportunity to do development work because people learn things by participating and increase their skills and have new opportunities, perhaps as a result of citizen science, as well as just an issue of gathering data for SDGs.
Thank you very much, Francois. And I'm very happy to see that Gita Krau has just added something about the mass experiment in Denmark involving 30,000 to 60,000 kids every year. So that's great. And please do put up more messages. Walter, I want to ask you about this, and I'm now turning it around a little bit from the point of view of a researcher. And would you say that one of the benefits of citizen science is making people think about the importance of science and research with regard to this? Is it a way of getting people more interested in statistics? For example, what's your take on that, Walter, especially with regard to young people?
Yes, definitely yes. I think we are suffering from how to say, an unsatisfactory level of statistical and data literacy in our societies. And that's the reason for a couple of problems in, let's say, using social networks and believing in alternative facts and all these things. So I think the learning curve could be a real argument in favor of citizen science, so that participation in processes means understanding better what the product called statistics is and what it not is, where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. So it's like with other products. If you use it, you get familiar with the potentials. And the more you are in the production process, in the design and the communication, the better you understand. So, but the problem starts at schools, because nowadays in schools, for example, the statistics classes, they belong to mathematics, and this I think is wrong. The statistics should belong to social education, so social themes, history, and all these things, so that it becomes very normal that empirical work is done in all kinds of classes, even in languages. And and then I think we can close the gap, and citizens become also more willing to volunteer for citizen science projects, for example. Apart from that, of course, we suffer from, not only in citizen science, from a gap of knowledge in statistics, which is there for all kind of voluntary work. So because it does not cost, it does not count in the calculation of the GDP. And only now and then there is satellite calculations which put a number on the entire value, social value of voluntary work, which is then huge. So our society couldn't survive without voluntary work. Clear. But we don't have a number for it.
Yeah. Thank you, Walter. And again, in the comments, I could see some useful remarks about scientific citizenship. for example, and the relationship between citizen science and scientific citizenship, issue close to my heart. And also, I think particularly about students, I can see in Imma's comment, and young people. Marius or Carolina, is there anything we're missing in the chat? I can see so many helpful comments that we don't really need to respond, but is there anything crying out for the panel's wisdom?
A lot of
Carolina?
passion for citizen science I see now in the latest comments, but I don't see anything not solved. Marius, maybe you have a keen
It's
eye.
maybe kind of a niche point. There was something about the visibility of contributions by NGOs, civil society organizations, etc., that may not see themselves as conducting citizen science, may not be active part of the citizen science community. So maybe that's something.
Yeah, to recognize the role of NGOs, etc., and possibly the relationship between citizen science activities, policymakers, and third sector, or whatever you want to call that, social movements or NGOs. Yeah, that point is noted. We've got about 5 minutes to go before we wrap up. I'm somewhat astonished to see. So now I turn nervously to the panel because we only have 5 minutes. So you're going to get 1 minute each to basically make your wish. If there was one thing that you could do regarding to strengthen the relationship between citizen science projects, and let's talk about sustainable development very broadly now, including SDGs. If you could do one thing or get one wish, what would you ask for? And I started in one alphabetical order going one way, so I'm now going to reverse that and start at the end of the alphabetical order, which, Walter, it comes back to you. You have 1 minute to say one wish regarding the relationship between sustainable development and citizen science.
I think Ariane will smile now because what I say is well known to her. So one wish would be that from the European level, this is now Michael and my colleagues in Eurostat and the JRC, that they would foster and push for a exercise which can bridge between the European statistical system and efforts to improve citizen science.
Thank you very much for your wish. I can't give these wishes, but I think it's nevertheless interesting. Ariana, you've been smiling for the last 2 hours, so I'm sure you are smiling. But if you had a wish as well as a smile, what would that wish be, please? Oh, you're muted, I think, Ariana. Yeah.
Yes. So my wish is very similar to that of Walter. That's why I'm smiling even more broadly. Actually, to the EU Commission, but also to member states, new environmental legislation is becoming more and more directed at empowerment of local action. It would be amazing if by default, it would be foreseen that new indicators to assess implementation and to inform distribution of funding would be co-designed with actors across governance levels.
Thank you very much, Ariane, and please keep smiling. Francois.
Yes, well, Alan, like you, I'm at a business school, the Geneva School of Economics and Management, and I think, my wish is that we reframe citizen science. I see citizen scientists as entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs trying to achieve social change, environmental change, and they need business models. They need ways to survive. They need ways to get funding, which doesn't depend only on waiting for Brussels to give them money, which, as we know, may not be a stable source for forever. I also see that is a great opportunity. We see spin-offs in this field doing quite well, and I think there can be more. So I really hope that we work on this side of it, which gives young people in Europe job opportunities as well.
Thank you. And linking with the economic agenda that we briefly touched upon as well. Thank you, Francois. Dilek.
I think all that is said what I could wish for, but I will emphasize money. So I would wish for more money for citizen science, and this is not just like that, but a lot of the funding that come through to citizen science projects, we see that they are really funding pilot studies, and we need to go beyond that. We need to go funding pilot initiatives. So if we want this to be really impactful at a European scale, we need more funding. We need proper funding beyond those pilot initiatives. And I also would like to see a lot of those things turning into policy decisions. Because just data being integrated into official statistics or used by the NSO to report on something doesn't mean that they're actually making real change in policies and people's lives. So we really need to make that kind of connection between official statistics and policy as well. And Walter has, I'm sure he could say a lot on that as well. But I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dilek. Michael, yeah, what do you wish for from Brussels?
First of all, supporting what the other panelists have said, but if I could put it in a couple of sentences, I wish that citizen science becomes an integral part, not only of the research and science system, but also a part of, and that from the very early stages of sustainability frameworks. And that means being part of designing the indicators, where do we want to go, but also being part, for instance, of how data is collected, how data is shared, how they're integrated with other data sources.
Thank you so much, Mikhail, and thank you to all the panel. We're perfectly on time. I'm impressed to see, but now I'm going to hand back, but with very warm thanks to the panelists, and also if I can just say personally, everyone who's been sending messages in the chat. We haven't necessarily picked up every point, but I could feel the level of commitment, and I'm really happy to see people sharing information too. So that's extremely valuable. Thank you. And now I'm handing back to either Marius or Carolina, I think.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Alan, and thank you everyone on the panel for this wonderful discussion, and also thank you to the audience for your input and all your comments in the chat. There's a wealth of information and fascinating projects there, so I read up on that. As I said, this meeting or webinar was recorded, so we'll upload the recording soon, and you can rewatch if you feel like it. So yeah, all that is left for me to say, and I have to briefly share my screen again to do that and find the right slide for that first, is that we have created a very, very short post-event survey. It's really tiny. If you have a minute or two to spare, it would be fantastic if you could fill that in. And otherwise, I can only thank you again and wish you a very pleasant day.